Welcome to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws, the podcast that cuts through the rubbish to explore the world of neurodiversity. I'm your host, Nic King.
And I'm your host, Kate Fox. And together we're here to explore, understand and celebrate being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. From ADHD and autism to dyslexia and other quirky brains, we talk about it all.
And go off on tangents. So whether you're neurodivergent, love someone who is, or you're just curious about neurodivergent minds, you are in the right place.
Let's get ready to juggle some words and maybe even a few chainsaws, metaphorically, of course. Welcome to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws with me, Kate Fox, and Nic King, exploring the world of neurodiversity, autism, ADHD, and I would say giving a unique cultural insight into this stuff, really. Fair to say, isn't it, Nic?
I'm not here. And things.
Stuff and things. And our particular stuff and things this week is naturally neurodivergent-friendly spaces, and also creative ones if we get time to have a look at that too. What do we mean? What do we mean by naturally neurodivergent-friendly spaces?
Spaces that feel naturally comfortable and safe, where you have to do minimal masking and that you don't worry about your neurodivergence within them. And the phrase that I use with my young people is, do you feel happy, comfortable and safe?
Okay. Yeah.
And spaces that feel like that, normally with more neurodivergent people within them than not.
Indeed, because the people possibly help create the space or assign that the space exists and is safe. They're like canaries in the coal mine, or that space is there because some neurodivergent people have made it. There's a variety of reasons why the people are part of it. Because I'm thinking, I have to say, part of what... So this is very particular to me, but nothing makes me happier than an empty restaurant with only me and whoever I'm in with, or just me, or an empty swimming pool. And I suppose technically, so that fits for me as... But then I am often in that cafe or restaurant and no one else is there. And if I am with someone I've met up for a coffee or for lunch or whatever, and they're going, oh, isn't it a pity? Oh, there's no atmosphere in here. And I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Although I am sorry that this space has no customers.
And that might be a problem long term.
Yes, because this space won't exist anymore. So that is actually one just off the wall example of how that works for me.
And it doesn't have to be a real life space. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be a space that's physical and tangible. There are a lot of online spaces, groups, Discord servers, WhatsApp groups, lots of groups, chats.
That's another good example. I'm thinking, so if I look through my phone threads now,
yes,
some of the WhatsApp groups are neurodivergent friendly. And by that, I might mean, we're not getting flooded with messages. There's not loads of random videos and memes popping up every 5 minutes where someone's going, watch this. And it's something really boring. And where people aren't planning and organising and going, right, next Tuesday, and then 7 Tuesdays' time at 7 p.m. Can you confirm what you're doing? And can you tell me what you're doing exactly and put it in this form? I mean, there are groups like that, aren't there?
To be fair, I am in groups like that. And they are neurodivergent groups, but I think there is something, and that's sort of, it's one of the differences between me and you is that you are child-free and I'm not. So lots and lots of my peers and friends have children, but they also have, because you hang out with other autistic parents, they have autistic children, and then we need to do the planning because timey-wimey. And yeah, I have various. So I'm a planner I've got like theatre booked into 2025 and I booked that 6 months ago. And people are like, I can't deal with that. And I'm like, well, that's fine. You don't have to. I'm doing it. Oh, is theatre a naturally ND friendly space? I feel like circus is. But then there's the difference between being in the audience and being in the crew. Ooh.
Oh, that is interesting.
Ooh.
I mean, what I'm already feeling is, okay, well, first of all, tell me the difference then. Which of those is the ND friendly space for you, audience or crew?
I mean, yeah, probably crew. I think creative people more regularly than not that I know are neurodivergent. I think there is a significant amount of neurodivergence on stage, be that a comedy stage, an acting stage, a circus stage. Yeah, there is a lot of ND in there. And
in terms of in the audience, how might it? Because actually, yeah. So a circus, it's interesting. I would not immediately feel that physically. Oh, that is interesting. Physically or sensorily for me as a particularly friendly environment, as in I'm imagining it's really crowded, it's really loud, the audience are just shouting out at random points, there's a big bang, someone's getting fired from a cannon unexpectedly, there's jeopardy because someone might be about to, I know that we are called neurotypical people don't juggle chainsaws. I'm certainly a neurodivergent person who is not going to juggle a chainsaw and is going to feel every moment of the potential chainsaw limb severing incident that's about to happen any minute now in the circus. Ooh, actually, so already what I'm picking up, I thought we were going to quite neatly go, yes, what constitutes an ND-friendly space is this. And actually, I'm already getting the sense of, oh, heck, it's really variable. And it's not only variable to each person, but it's variable according to what that space is doing at any given time, almost.
yes, and I think as neurodivergent people, we have a strengths-based system in that what we are good at, we are incredibly good at. And often what we are bad at, we are incredibly bad at. So I am also not juggling chainsaws because I cannot juggle. Any sort of cross-body movement for me is really difficult and it makes my brain feel melty. And I'm very bad at throwing and I'm very bad at catching. And if we wanted to call that sort of a dyspraxia type situation, I'd be on board with that. But then the people I know who do juggle chainsaws clearly have the opposite of that, and they are very, very good and very, very aware of their space. But what me and you are really, really good at is words.
Yeah, and that makes me think of how I've often said that once I discovered the spoken word world, that is full of, for me, neurodivergent friendly spaces, be it in the form of an open mic poetry night where people are just getting up on stage. And so for me, a stage personally, on the whole, is a neurodivergent friendly space because when I'm on that space with a microphone, maybe just the lights, no one else is talking, so I don't have to work out when I can talk.
Yep.
It's nice and quiet. I can hear myself speak and think. And yes, the first few times I got up on stage to do stand-up comedy, I was physically shaking so much that I could barely talk or breathe. But once I'd got over that, what a lovely stage. And generally the ethos of a spoken word night, because it's full of, again, neurodivergent poets of various stripes, then something about it feels, again, you said happy, safe and comfortable, didn't you? I think.
Safe,
yeah.
And I think because people often, I am a talker, but if I go out and I deliver training in person, I often say that I want to have lunch alone. And that is because the thing is, when you're training, or when you're standing up and you are, this isn't a reciprocal situation. This isn't communication. This is presentation. And there is a massive, massive difference of that. And I'd been trying to figure out why I found going out in training in person so difficult when I can do it 9 to 5 on Zoom without even thinking about it, really. And I figured out that it was lunch, and the fact that I had to be social over lunch and continue essentially to work as well over lunch, and I didn't actually get a break. Yeah.
But I feel like we might be coming up against realizing yet another podcast, because I'm particularly intrigued by, so you actually say,
oh, like
to have lunch alone.
Do you know what and it was like? It was an arty type person. She was like, do you sort of have like a rider? And I'm like, I'm not Beyonce. And she was like, well, seriously, I have a rider. And I am also not Beyonce. She was like, just decide that you've got a rider. And I was like, I can have a rider. That's fine. For maybe, does everyone know what a rider is? That's sort of where you describe, before you go into a space, sort of your needs and like, your wants, and like how you be safely in that space, I suppose. How you are most comfortable in that space. Yeah.
Called an access rider when it's kind of asking for accommodations or access type stuff, because in the olden days, well, and still now, a band would have their rider, or Mariah Carey would have, I don't know if this was an urban myth or not, but a room full of puppies when she was on top of the pups. Well, we're not asking for a room full of puppies, are we? We just want to be happy, safe. And actually, I would quite like a room full of puppies. Could that go on my access rider? Anyway.
I'm not getting you a room full of puppies.
Okay. Maybe next time. Maybe when we've done really well. But okay. So again, this is what you are doing, because we've said naturally ND spaces, but in this instance, you make, by knowing your need and making your request, you make that lunch space an ND friendly space, actually. Yes.
Because quite often, if I'm going out and training in person, it's a school, or it's like a medical type site, or like, I mean, it's sometimes really random places, but it's normally somewhere that I'm not used to. Do you know what I mean? It's not a space that I have chosen, and therefore is unfamiliar, at least a bit, at minimum. So yeah, and yeah, creating your own spaces, but that requires a level of knowledge of your needs.
Absolutely. And I see you as someone who's very attuned to your needs, but it sounds like it took you a while to realize that the thing that was draining you and taking energy out of your batteries faster was the lunch element of training. See, I have a thing, again, well, I'm also not Beyonce, but sometimes when I go and do events, there is a thing where the organisers of the event might think that the audience would want to meet me, the person doing the event. And now it's not. So an instance where that's nice is doing a book signing, because essentially I go and sit at a table and sign books, and people come up to me one by one and say something, and then I sign the book and they move on. That's fine. But I've quite recently been in situations where there's an expectation, stated or strongly implied, that I could hang around in a bar so that people can just come up and chat to me in an unstructured way. And I do think, oh my God, this is autistic hell.
Yeah.
But I am not quite able yet. And it's interesting. It's definitely a learning edge for me. I'm not quite able to say, ooh, that's not. Ooh.
And it's difficult, isn't it, in those spaces, because when you were talking about a stage space, what you are selling in that moment is yourself.
Yes, exactly. But
then you should still be able to have boundaries around that, but then they're quite difficult to enforce.
Yeah, and actually, it basically, because it looks unfriendly, doesn't it? It looks like you're being potentially deeper. And I'm just thinking of a situation. So normally, if I launch a poetry book, again, that's a very controlled environment. It's really nice. I enjoy those. It's essentially, it's a stage space, or maybe it's a bookshop or an art centre. Lovely. There's an audience. And so I'm getting to be the nicest end of it. I'm not having to sit squished with the audience, because when I'm on the other side of it, being, the punter, I do
Yes.
quite hard. And I was so sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. I'll come back to poetry launches, but the other day I went to a talk on ADHD in women, actually, which was really interesting, but it was in a very packed space. But up to the left there was a kind of jutting out bit with almost scaffold round that I presume was usually where wheelchairs would go, actually. Right. But there were no wheelchairs, and we were there just on the dot of when the event was starting. And I was like, could we sit there? And we took chairs. There were 3 of us, all autistic actually, took chairs and sat there. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. And all through the event, I felt so relieved not to be all squished with everybody else. And actually, had there been wheelchair users there, we would have, we wouldn't have gone there, or we would have left and not taken that space. Although thinking about it, actually, we could have claimed that space anyway, as in maybe said, well, we're autistic, could we be up here? Having said that, that was a room full of women with ADHD. We were not the only people. So that in itself was interesting. But coming back to the poetry launch, so I find those quite easy. But recently, I was involved in an exhibition, and there were 4 other artists. I'm not an artist, but I sort of, was there doing poetry things that got turned into art, like a stoat in a boat with a grot. But that's a whole
I like that.
It's just artistic joy, so joyous. But, a private view, right, when they open an exhibition before it's properly open and they have people come, that's just loads of people milling around. And there were loads of people in art galleries, which I usually find to be naturally neurodivergent-friendly spaces, because, again, for me, that's often about quiet and space. It was packed with people, and there was not structured interaction with them. It was a bit like, just wander about. And also they don't know who you are and that you're the person who did this. So you'll have to go up to them and chat to them. That was the tacit expectation. And I fulfilled the tacit expectation. But again, was like, flipping it. That was hard work.
Yes. And I mean, to an extent, sometimes hard work's fine within reason when you can control it. But yes. But the fact that we have to think about it, like we have to think about everything. So like you're talking about sort of like putting your chair in that space. You will always find me on the end of an aisle. Always, without fail. If I am like in a space, I am at the end of the aisle. And I'm fairly near the front. Because I find that the less humans I have to see in front of me, the ones behind me I can pretend don't exist. So therefore there's less of them, which isn't true, but like, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. So that's probably all right. And that is why I book theatre into 2025, because if you don't book it soon, you don't get that aisle seat near the front. And that's, but the fact, and this is how, we burn through spoons and we have to think about our environment constantly, because you have to try and fit your environment around you. Yes.
And actually, so you being a planner, and actually the friend I went to this ADHD in women event with, she is also a planner and autistic, and I kind of get the benefits of her planning, because she'll say, I've booked for this and this, in 2037 when we might all of climate change. But anyway, do you let me know which of these, if any, you fancy going to. So that's really good, because obviously, left to my own devices, I will do what happened and turn up just on the dot of the event without even the particular well, it worked out really well in that instance, didn't it? Because we got to choose the best seats in the house. But actually planning would have meant, I mean, in that instance, there weren't seat numbers, so that's a whole different thing. But planning is something I really super struggle with myself, and I'm always intrigued by
the planning ones of us.
Yeah,
but we're happy to bring you along.
Yes, exactly. Greatly to my benefit. That's why this podcast is happening. I'd have been like, yes, that's a brilliant idea, Nic. We must do that some undefined day in an undefined future.
And I'm like, 9 o'clock Friday morning, you're on Zoom.
Exactly. Hi. Oh, sorry. Well, it's a different topic to what we're talking about, but I'm intrigued as to how that planning sort of, how does it feel for you? Because, executive functioning is one of the issues that many of us struggle with most. And I suppose I just have this quite simple equation in my head of, planning, organising, it's really hard. It hurts my brain.
Yeah. You see, for an autistic ADHD, I don't know whether my executive function is fairly good or that I'm just highly anxious. And I'm not entirely sure which one that is. I know people look at my Google Calendar and cry. Because not only does it have literally every movement I need to do in the day in, but it also has the movements of the rest of my family.
Yeah. Again, I live this this simple life of me in a flat with no children, and that is still
quite overwhelming.
It's hard work. Yeah, and I'm sort of really impressed that I have now managed to achieve, although my office is not tidy, if you looked around my flat, you'd find it quite tidy and quite clean, and I'm on top of my washing and things like that. But that is quite hard won and hard achieved, I have to say. So to manage that with multiple people. So actually, let's come back to naturally neurodivergent spaces. I'm going to really have to question the word naturally now, because does it ever apply? But because thinking of our houses, your home, you can make that into a neurodivergent space, ideally. And so the way I've done that for me is mostly it doesn't have anyone else in it. And my living room and bedroom in particular, they're full of books, which are objects that bring me joy, and they're full of colours that are joyous to me, essentially. And some of my bookshelves are colour-coded.
Like that one behind you.
Exactly. And light is really important to me, and there's good natural light. So So yeah. What about home for you?
So I had the privilege of near enough building mine. We built it back from the front wall. And there is space, and there is space for children and husbands, and everyone does kind of have their own little pocket of space. So my little bit of office is my pocket of space. It's a lot of considered lighting. It's a lot of natural colours. There's literally rainbows going on in the background, but there is nothing particularly bright that's permanent. Lighting's massive. So I've currently got sort of sun coming through a rainbow catcher, a light to my left, a rainbow light to my right, and another light on, and then natural light coming through the window. The light's huge. And then sort of, I do literally live in the middle of a field, and noise is a thing. I don't mind noise as long as it's within my control. But noise that I cannot control is not all right. And then, and lots of just very sort of, it feels very sort of natural in my home. I think that's what a lot of people, so like it could be outside kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's interesting about the in the middle of a field. I had a really poignant conversation at Artscape with somebody who has basically, so they have a really super stressful job, actually working for an autism charity, and they managed to buy basically a little wood
Yeah.
A little tiny wood, and that is their space. And they go to this little tiny wood, and the nature of it, obviously the trees, the sky, grass, the sense that it is far away, that there is not noise. I think it is actually kind of quite near other places, but somehow it's quite literally she has, well, not created, but it is a naturally created indie space. It's her space. And I remember thinking, wow, because we talk about neurodivergent privilege, that's probably a good example of that functioning. If you are able to buy yourself a little wood or make your home environment how you want it to be, but actually that can be achieved even with whatever space you have, can't it? You can make it what you need it to be if you know what your needs are.
Absolutely. And I think, obviously as adults, I mean, there's a level of privilege, but we always have a level of agency, don't you? Once you get to adulthood, you get a level of agency over your space. And I think like they talk a lot about young people living in their bedrooms, don't they? But that's because that's the only space they have control over.
Absolutely.
Huge. The space that you are within's massive. It's a huge part of being neurodivergent and creating and seeking those spaces.
And not having, I think of my friends who have a not officially diagnosed or identified, but he's slightly exploring the possibility now, and they are, but in quite a tentative way. Anyway, basically, he's an autistic son. And they would often, and I sort of forgot how, oh yeah, this is what people do. And they'd be like, oh, and he goes up to his room and he doesn't even come down for tea with us. And he just visits, he doesn't live with them. And I was thinking, well, of course he doesn't. He needs his space. Just let the poor lad have his space.
Yes.
But of course, there's such a imperative, isn't there, that functions, whether it's for me doing an event, being expected to, oh, come and be sociable, oh, come and join in, come over here, come and be part of it.
Or come have lunch with the people you're training.
Exactly. And actually that's, it is really quite hard to assert, oh, no, I need this space. I don't just need this space because it looks nice and feels nice and I've made it how I need it to be, either temporarily as a pocket of space in a school or wherever, or because it's my room or my house. But, I actually need it to function. It's not really, well, it is optional, apparently, but I will function so much better in this space if I have it. I will use less energy. I will be less anxious. I will be, I'll be, oh, I don't know why this awful phrase has just come into my head. I apologise. I sound like a women's magazine. I'll be the best me I can be.
Oh, you sucked. Okay, cut out.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, dear.
Oh, dear.
Just do you. What? Who has taken over my brain? You know what I mean.
So but to just do you need to know what you need.
Absolutely. And that feels like an upcoming topic. But I think we're
almost
reaching a moment of conclusion here, actually. And it's funny because I know we don't know what we're going to say necessarily. But
this is not the podcast that we planned.
It's not really. And actually, that's the first time that's happened. And I think that's quite important, really, because we think we're talking about, this simple thing. And naturally, ND spaces, it's so dependent on context and situation, actually. And do they just naturally occur? It's not quite as simple as that. But you have an equation that summarises this, I believe.
We're going to quote as an end the fabulous Dr. Luke Bearden, and his golden equation is autism plus environment equals outcome, which essentially means that the environments that you would put yourself in as an autistic person heavily produce outcomes for better or worse for yourself. So the more you can put yourself in an environment that makes you comfortable, safe, happy, joyous, being the best you. Yeah, the easier, hopefully, and better life maybe.
And actually, of course, that really applies for everyone.
Yeah.
Actually, whatever their neurotype. But there's something about, you have to accept what you're given, stick with the space you've got. No, you can, maybe spaces are not so easily naturally occurring, but you can remake them to fit you or find a niche within that space, ideally, that does work for you.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thanks for tuning in to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws. We're so glad you joined us today to explore the fascinating world of neurodivergence with your hosts, me, Nic King.
And me, Kate Fox. If our conversation sparked a thought, a question, or even a smile, don't keep it to yourself. Drop us a line at hello@neurotypicals-don't-juggle-chainsaws.co.uk or visit our website, neurotypicals-don't-juggle-chainsaws.co.uk, to write in. We'd love to hear from you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, consider leaving us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast platform.
Until next time, keep embracing the unique ways you juggle the chainsaws of life.